a dynamic and pioneering force in the world of robotics. Today we have Andrea Gellatly, team captain of the formidable BattleBots team Witch Doctor. With her boundless enthusiasm for engineering and innovation, Andrea has captivated audiences and inspired aspiring roboticists around the globe. Her passion for robotics is matched not only by her commitment to education and outreach, as she actively encourages young minds to explore the exciting possibilities of STEM fields. Her journey is a testament to the power of creativity, perseverance, and teamwork in overcoming and achieving technological excellence. Welcome.
Thank you. What a kind introduction. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. So, we're just going to go ahead and jump right into some questions. So, we're going to rewind a little bit and start with your early on robotics journey, starting off with BattleBots IQ. So, first question: how did your early experiences in BattleBots IQ help shape your approach to robot design and competition?
Yeah, I owe a lot to BattleBots IQ. It was run by Nola Garcia, who recently passed away, but she was a huge mentor and influence in my life. I graduated high school, or rather, I graduated middle school, convinced I was going to be an artist until I started building robots at my high school, and it totally changed the trajectory of my career. I just wanted to study something that let me build robots, or as close to building robots full time as possible. I went to an all-girls high school that had a huge BattleBots program. So, now as a female in the sport, I get a lot of attention, I guess, because I'm definitely a minority in the field. But that's not how I was introduced to the sport. I was one of many girls, and until we went to our first competition, I didn't know it was any different. So I think that's really the biggest influence that BattleBots IQ had for me was just how welcoming it was. And it was really an amazing place to just learn and make mistakes and build robots.
Amazing. That is so awesome to hear. I relate to you. My introduction to robotics, I was on a all girls team at an all girls public school. And just like you said, it was just amazing and welcoming space to explore, make mistakes, maybe cause little explosions, you know.
It happens. It happens to all of us.
Amazing. So, keeping on with your robotics journey, we'll switch to Witch Doctor for a moment. Can you describe the evolution of Witch Doctor throughout its career and its different iterations?
Yeah, Witch Doctor, we've competed on the TV show now for 7 seasons, but we competed actually with a few years with it as a middleweight robot, so 120 pounds, about half of the 250 on TV. So we already had a few iterations of Witch Doctor. But once we got on the TV show, we had no idea what to expect. And every year the game changes so much that, Witch Doctor started as a vertical spinner with a kind of a little sidekick robot called Shaman that was a big flamethrower. So we were trying to, be as memorable as we possibly could, which has always been a theme with Witch Doctor. Um, every time we lose a match, we figure out a new weakness and something to redesign. Even a lot of times when we win, we find things that we want to redesign. So the journey has really evolved based on all those learnings, usually the hard way. We lost our first season because we got stuck upside down. We came back the next season with the self-righting mechanism, and we lost because we got hit overhead. We didn't have enough overhead armor. Season 3, we debuted our rib armor, which has become pretty iconic to our robot. And those are just some examples. Those are the more visible ones. Um, but yeah, every time we get in the arena, which, happens 10, 12 times a season, we learn new things and we already have more ideas. So every time we put Witch Doctor in the arena, we're already thinking of changes to it. So the evolution is the best part of engineering, at least to me, is my favorite part. I know a lot of people get to, they design something and it's kind of their baby and they don't want to change it. I'd say I'm the exact opposite. I designed something and can see ways to make it better, and it's already obsolete in my mind that I want to make the next thing. But that's, I think, a really exciting way to look at engineering.
Awesome. That's a really cool way to think about it. And I love what you said about you have lessons learned. This happened, this competition this season. All right, we're going to do this for the next one. So it's ever growing and changing. That's amazing. All right. Well, speaking of Team Witch Doctor, what inspires that unique design and the whole theme?
Yeah, BattleBots is a very serious sport. It's very destructive. There's a lot on the line, especially as the TV show gets more and more popular. The stakes feel like they're higher and higher. And we've always thought that we can't really control how well we do on BattleBots, no matter how much work we put into it. It's a chaotic sport. It depends a lot on what other people do. There's a little bit of luck involved. So, like I said before, we've always tried to be as memorable as possible. And we wanted a theme that wasn't based on destruction, I guess. It's like Tombstone and Bite Force and all these like super intimidating names.
Mhm.
And we just wanted to have fun with it. So my first robot ever was called Kerminator. It was based on Kermit the Frog and Terminator. That was 14-year-old us thought that was a great idea. And even then, I competed in a green jacket and a hat that had frog eyes. So it's kind of always been really important to me. And luckily, I found a team that loves that aspect of it as much as we do. And it's just become really fun because when we put on the skeleton jackets and the top hat, it's like
Mhm.
game time. Like you transform from pit mode to competition mode, and it's been really fun for us as well.
Love it, love it. Nothing beats a good outfit to get you in that mindset. Well, that's a perfect segue into our next question. Speaking of the Terminator, love that name. How has your strategy and design philosophy changed from your first robot, the Terminator, to now your current builds?
Wow. Yeah, that was probably 20 years ago at this point. So there has been a lot of changes. Like I said, some things haven't changed because the theming and the color and the creativity have always been there. Kerminator was a terrible robot. We kind of learned, it was eight of us, eight girls, and we learned how to build robots with it. So we learned how to cut metal on a bandsaw and weld and use electronics and what seal lead acid batteries were, because that was all the rage then, the latest technology. It's pretty obsolete now. And then we went on, it had a saw blade weapon. It was not great. We moved on to build a full body spinner by the end of high school called Marvinator that we had a lot more success with. You could see a Terminator
You're
theme.
right. Seeing a theme here.
Marvin the Martian. Um, and yeah, it's just the philosophy changes every time you compete, and you have to evolve with the sport as well. I said I built full body spinners towards the end of high school. Those were like they call it the meta, like the peak design at the time. Full body spinners were doing a lot of damage and nobody really knew how to beat them. Now it seems the same way for vertical spinners. So I've seen those changes happen already, and I know we are a vertical spinner now. I know something will come to defeat vertical spinners, and we'll have to change our whole philosophy and our strategy again. So it's definitely cyclical, and it's fun to have been in the sport long enough to see like two or three iterations of that or cycles of that. Um, but yeah, I'd say a lot of it is similar, obviously more sophisticated as we've learned what we're doing a little bit more.
Right. Amazing. Yeah, as I said, it's ever changing, always growing. It's amazing to see like how it changes over the year too. Like you said, with the technology itself and the batteries. I like showing like the controllers we use when I first competed to the
Yeah.
kids now that have like fancy Bluetooth controllers and they're like, ooh, you use that. So definitely a big change as we go on. So, how do you think youth focused competitions like BattleBots IQ contribute to STEM education?
Oh, I think it's an amazing resource. I love competition-based engineering. I think it's a way to make it really fun, and the competition really elevates, I think, everybody involved to the next level. If it wasn't for competition engineering, I wouldn't be involved in engineering. I don't think I would have found my interest in it any other way. And it's just, like I said, it elevates the game for everybody. And not just for engineers. I think a lot of people see robotics as something for engineers.
Mhm.
My high school team, I think three of us ended up being engineers out of eight. But there's teamwork and problem solving and logistics and fundraising, and there's so many aspects to it that if you're able to be successful in a small BattleBots team or robot team of any kind, you pretty much have all the skills you need to run a business. Timelines being a big part of it, working under pressure, I could go on and on. There's so many skills that transfer to any number of fields, even if you don't decide to go into engineering.
Excellent. Yes, I love that you said that it has so many transferable skills that you're learning in here. A lot of people think, "Oh, you're in robotics, you're just going to do robotics." But like you said, there's so many different paths you can choose. And this the exposure, like you said, you originally had an art path and getting involved in this. Same for me. I originally had a medical path and then I got into robotics and then I went on to study software engineer, which I never even thought about doing until after robotics. All right. So keep going down the path about your experiences. How has your experience in different weight classes influenced your approach in robot design?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that there's different weight classes, so I'm glad you bring that up. Most people that build robots, I'd say, would start in smaller weight classes and work their way up. Um, when I started in 2004, we built 120-pound robots as our
Okay.
first robots, which is insane now as I, try to kind of advise younger builders. I would not advise any 14-year-old to start at that scale. But it's what was available to me and what I had a support group around. So that's, definitely a priority to follow that support group and learn from other people. But when I graduated high school, and went to college, they also had middleweight robots. But once college was over, there was no way for me to keep doing that because there were no competitions that weren't collegiate. And obviously, it costs multiple $1,000s to build a robot at that scale, and a team, which I no longer had. So I started competing at the 1-pound robot scale, 3-pound robots. Um, and a lot of things scale and some things don't. And it's really interesting to just have to learn new technologies just because you know what robots, wheelchair motors were great for
Right.
big robots, but you get the smaller robots and you get into the RC airplane area for finding parts because nothing's designed to put into a BattleBot. You're just kind of
Mhm.
adapting off the shelf things. Um, so it's just learning how different materials work, how things break. Um, one advantage of doing the smaller weight classes is that you can iterate a lot faster because it's a lot easier. They're faster to build, easier to fund. Um, So now I definitely advise to start small, learn there, and then go big. Um, Big robots are really hard to test safely. There's a lot more events for smaller robots. So after doing small robots for a few years, then I got back into BattleBots in 2015 when the show started back up. But yeah, I kind of had a non-linear journey compared to most builders. I think now that the show's on TV again and it's gotten so popular that there's a clearer path and there's a lot more events, and hopefully it's easier for people to get involved.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, you started in the big leagues and worked your way through. So that is a good piece of advice. So continuing off that advice, is there any other advice that you would give to young builders entering into their first competition?
Yeah, I mean, if they're already building something and going to the first competition, I'd say my advice would be not to put 100% of your focus on winning, which I know is very tempting because you built this thing you're proud of and you want to do as well as possible, and you should. Um, but I think right now I can't remember if I won or lost my first fight. But what's really memorable from my first couple of events is the people that I met, seeing people build things different ways, solving the same problem different ways. Um, yeah, I'd say spend all the time you can talking to other builders and paying attention to what they're building and trying to learn from them. Um, to this day, I'd say 90% of my close friends I've met through building robots because all of a sudden you meet this group of people that you have this crazy hobby in common with, and chances are you have a lot more in common than you just like to build robots. Um, so yeah, I'd say that's the biggest thing is enjoy the sport as a whole. Don't get too tunnel vision into winning because there's so much more to it. Um, to joining the community at large.
Amazing. Yes, it's definitely the experience. I can't tell you like how fast when I did in high school, how fast 4 years went by. I'm like, wow. You know? And like you say, I definitely have lifelong friends. As you said, we probably some of the closest bonding I ever had, especially doing first and where you have that time limit to build. And I just remember just doing nothing like, nope, can't do anything, not going to this club. I have robotics. So just Sitting in your room, building, coding, programming. I don't think you can get any closer than that. Oh, right. How do you balance creativity and technical requirements when designing a combat robot?
That is a good question. So we get I wouldn't call it hate mail, but let's say critical mail of people saying that if we spent less time, making our robot look cool, that we'd perform better. Um, and that's not the case at all. We try to make every aesthetic decision that we make is also functional.
Mhm.
In trying to make Witch Doctor look more skeletal and have kind of a rib cage armor, we came across the current design we have, which is, a layer of ribs, a big air gap, which, we always say air is the best armor. And then we have more armor underneath. So it's kind of, you can learn a lot just from nature and seeing how things are designed, and the human body is one of those things. Um, so, we don't make any decisions that are just to make the robot look cool. Everything has to have a functional purpose. But we're also trying very hard not to design a box with wheels that's
Right.
really boring and forgettable. Um, but it's like kind of asking, does someone, when you're writing a song, do you write the music or the lyrics first? It's like everything has to happen together. You can't just design the whole robot functionally and then try to change the aesthetic of it because it won't work. And the same the other way. You can't make it really pretty and cool and then try to make it work because that won't work. So um, we try to make it look cool, but everything has a function and a reason for looking the way it does. So hopefully by also trying that, because it's a lot harder to design something that looks aesthetically pleasing and different. It'd be a lot easier to design a box. But I think in trying to do both, the extra effort is worth it in a more functional robot than we could have otherwise.
Great. Love that you're getting best of both worlds in there. And just to love that you, like you said, you can grab from real life objects, body, nature to help bring you into that designing process. All right. So, thinking back into your journey, can you describe a particularly challenging engineering problem that you had to solve?
I could think of many. That's what engineering is
Hmm.
we're basically problem solvers. And the more we solve problems, the better we get at solving problems. But I'd say a really big one happened in 2020, BattleBots during the pandemic. Um, like I've mentioned, it's really hard to test these robots safely, and it mostly applies to our spinning weapons. Witch Doctor's a vertical spinner. It has two 1-inch discs, and it spins at 250-mile-per-hour tip speed, which is the legal limit on BattleBots. And when we got to the first match in 2020, we got to a first big impact against a robot named Hydra, which is one of the best flippers in the sport. And we landed weapon first onto the ground, hit the solid steel floor, and our discs broke. And we said, okay, well, they threw us very high. And we landed weapon, worst case. It was probably just a worst case scenario. But we went against, in the next match against a crusher, which should not be able to break our weapon. And we had the same issue. They clamped down on us, we hit them, and our weapon broke. So we were basically two matches down, two losses. We only had two more chances to get into the tournament. And we had to figure out what was wrong with the material, how to fix it, and how to do it very quickly in a city and state that is not home for us, we're not familiar with. Um, so we narrowed it down. We said it must be a material issue. But instead of assuming we just had a bad batch of material, we decided to change the material entirely just to make sure that we weren't hedging all our bets on one root cause and then it was a different root cause. So we had to make a million calls, find somewhere we could buy the material, find somewhere we could cut 1-inch thick steel, which came from the shop of one of our competitors, Chomp, um, and retrofit it back onto the robot. And it worked. It didn't break. And then after the event, that got us through the event. After the event, we still had to root cause it. We sent our broken discs out for metallurgy, material analysis. We figured out that it was a material issue. It wasn't a hardening issue or a design issue or anything else. Um, and then we came up with a way to test the material. So now anytime we have a batch for weapon discs, we're able to test them to make sure they're not going to break. We basically built a 250-pound test load that we can hit in a safe place with Witch Doctor. So it's really changed the way that we build and test robots. And it was almost a disaster. We got to know a lot of LA because that's where it was at then, LA traffic. Um, but yeah, I can have a million stories that way. But when the team comes together and is stubborn enough to say we're going to fix this, so we're going to fix it today, um, it could also be a lot of fun to work that way.
Amazing. Yeah, just being able to think on the fly like that and come up with a solution, and how it's amazing how you applied that. So in the future, you're like, hey, this was a challenge point, and now we have something that'll kind of help us prevent us from getting there. It's really awesome. All right. Well, we talked a little bit about this, but back on the aesthetic sides of things, how do you think the aesthetics and the theme playing combat robotics are especially engaging for our younger viewers?
That's a big part of why we do it. We want to be relatable. I think our team looks different than a lot of teams.
Mhm.
We have women on our team, young people. We dressed up in skeleton jackets and top hats. We have this really colorful robot, and I think all of it is engaging. I've talked about trying to be memorable. Nowhere does that apply more than with kids watching the show. Um, and designing for kids doesn't mean that we're designing it to look like a toy or childish or cartoonish. Um, I feel like people don't give kids enough credit sometimes. Like they like complex, different things. I love to see kids dress as Witch Doctor for Halloween. To me, that's like the ultimate sign that we're doing something right is when out of, 70 robots, yours is a memorable one that they want to get hands on and build. And it's not just Witch Doctor. I've seen a bunch of robot costumes, but that's always really special to us. Um, but yeah, I think attracting the next generation of robot builders is huge. I didn't know what engineering was until I started high school and had a chance to join a robotics team. So I am an engineer in everything I do. I've realized now, an engineer and a maker. And I almost funneled that into art because art's very similar set of skills, just because I didn't know that engineering existed. So now with the platform that we have on BattleBots and how big it has gotten, we really try to use it to show kids that engineering is a great career path if they like to, if they'd like that. And it's just an option, and that building robots is fun and engaging. Um, and yeah, it's just trying to encourage the next generation to consider the STEM fields.
Amazing. That is awesome. I think that would be so cool to me to see an outfit inspired. So, now that we've talked about your journey leading up to now, we're going to start talking about where you are now. So, how has your experience in BattleBots influenced your career or other aspects of your life?
It has influenced everything about my life. Really, it really did change the direction of my life. I studied biomedical engineering. Um, and that may sound very different from BattleBots, but I realized in, medical device engineering, when we design something, the way we test if it works or not, which is required by the FDA, is by breaking it. You take it to failure and you see how it breaks and at what point it breaks. And that's exactly what you do on BattleBots. You design something indestructible and you test it to failure in battle, and then you go back and you change it so that failure point is higher or different next time, or an acceptable failure mode. Um, so to me, medical device is just channeling the same things we do
Mhm.
on BattleBots in a different way. Um, I specifically work in orthopedics, so we design trauma implants that put broken bones back together when your bone breaks in a way that a cast is not sufficient to fix. So I'd like to think that BattleBots has taught me a lot about putting broken things back together, and more importantly, to design things that don't break. Um, and more recently, since the pandemic, I've been working on developing educational robotics kits to try to get kids, kind of give them a pathway into building robots because I got very lucky and my high school had a huge robotics program at the time. So for me to get involved, all I had to do was walk into the classroom and sign up. And I know that that's not the case at most schools. So we came up with Camp Witch Doctor, which is a robot kit to build your first BattleBot. It's a 1 pound robot. Um, but it all happens at home. So you don't need to have a team. Your parents don't need to be able to help you. Um, Your school doesn't need to be involved. It's a kit that you get, and it comes with video lessons with me. So we could sit just like we are now, and you can learn how to build your robot from start to finish, motors, electronics, even CAD design. So it's been really, really fun to see kids able to engage and send pictures of the robots and start competing locally. So I'm having a lot of fun with my recent career change.
Amazing. That is so cool to hear. I don't know. I might need to go pick up a kit. That is so cool. And to hear how it influenced you, and now that you're on the other side, giving back and helping others get along that path. I had a similar path of getting involved as well. It was an accident actually that I got involved in robotics. I heard an announcement and I went home and I was like, Mom, this robotics. They said something about a robotics club. And she was like, just go. If you don't like it, you don't have to go back. And I went in, and 4 years later, I was still doing it. So that is amazing to hear that there is a kit accessible for kids to be able to explore that on their own at home outside of a school setting and just to dig in and go on their own robotics journey. All right. How do you think combat robotics can inspire interest in different engineering disciplines? So you talked a little bit with you and biomedical engineering.
Mhm. I think really one of the, I've mentioned meeting people, but I don't mean to repeat it, but it's such a big part of it. I've met so many different kinds of engineers and people in all sorts of different industries that apply the same skills. Um, and I didn't get to meet those people until I was well on my way. But I think for kids to have access to ask, you know, other builders that may be older than them what they're doing for a living and why they like doing that, um, it's huge. I mean, there's some obvious disciplines, right? Mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, software engineering. Um, but once you learn how to make things, it's so empowering that I think engineering disciplines could be really intimidating at first. You have to do like advanced physics and calculus and all these things. Um, but believing that you can do that starts with the moment that you make something and it works the way you expected it to work, or it doesn't work, but you're able to fix it to get it to work the way you want. Um, so I think just developing that confidence to be able to join the more intimidating fields and know that you are capable of doing it is huge.
Amazing. All right. Well, we're getting down to our last couple of questions here. So this next one is talking about our future of robotics. So what technological advancements in robotics are you most excited for future competitions?
Geez, there's been a lot of change over the last 20 years that I've been building robots, but I think the most impactful one that I see is just the ease of manufacturing. When I started, you design a part, then you had to find the shop by calling people, and you had to drive down to the shop and drop off the material and get them to cut it. And it was just kind of this huge barrier to getting custom parts made. Now there's so many companies where you just upload a file on a website and it shows up, a few days later. Set consent is a big one that has kind of changed the game for robot builders. So now anybody can make custom parts. You don't need to have kind of that learning curve and building that network of shops and water jet places. And you could just go online and upload a file. It's just like you would do to get something printed at Office Depot, except what you get back is a 3D part that you designed. It's just the cost of making parts has dropped so much with, the new advances in making parts. Um, so yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. It's just accessibility of manufacturing technology that just was not there when I started. It was, calling people to figure out who knew somebody that could get the part made. And that was, I think, one of the hardest parts really was being able to fund it and being able to find where to make stuff. So I'm really excited that it's so easy now.
Awesome. So glad that that has provided some ease into something that's already has a lot of moving parts. All right. Well, how do you think competitions like BattleBots can further encourage diversity in STEM fields?
Well, because I'm a woman in this field, I get this question quite a bit. I think it's just representation and visibility. And competition usually comes with some sort of built-in audience. You're usually competing in front of a crowd of whatever size it is. So that kind of naturally highlights diversity in the sport, and that in turn leads to more diversity in the sport. Um, Women in engineering, there's actually a lot more women in engineering now because we've talked about women in engineering a lot. So when I started, it was pretty rare. When I first started as an engineer, working full time, not in robotics, I was very often the only one in the room.
Mhm.
That's already changed. And the younger kids, robotics groups that I talk to, the more girls are in the group. So I think that it's just naturally changing now. It's just because representation has been highlighted so much. And I'm excited to see what's next. Um, I speak Spanish as my first language. My parents are
Mhm.
Cuban. And I remember a few years ago, BattleBots was looking for someone to do an interview in Spanish, and they had trouble finding somebody. There were like only two or three people out of 300 that build BattleBots that could do an interview in Spanish. So this just as an example, there's other underrepresented groups, um, and it's just a matter of helping them get access and be interested, just like women in engineering. I think that's such a success story. Um, but what we could do for other underrepresented groups next.
Amazing. Just thinking about it, I have a coworker and she always says you can't be what you can't see. So I love that you talked
Exactly.
about that exposure and seeing powerful women like you competing in this space, I'm sure is inspiring to so many. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up with our last question here. So, looking back on your whole journey, starting in high school all the way to now, what would you say has been your proudest achievement?
Um, a hard question to end on. Um, I mean, my mind first goes to measurable success, right? Like awards we've won and things like that. But I really think the thing I'm most proudest of is anytime I go to a local event and somebody's excited to meet us and show us their robot because they started building robots because they saw us building robots. That's so big for us. I had people do that for me. I had mentors in high school and college that went out of their way to help us. So I think paying it forward now is so important. And, like I said, we put a lot of effort into kind of being appealing to a young audience. So seeing that pay off and seeing kids so excited about something that we've built, that's our baby, is really fun and super, super rewarding.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been super inspiring. I relate to so much in your robotics journey. I'm sure that so many more will relate and continue to relate as you dominate. Just saying, Team Witch Doctor's personal favorites. But thank you
Hope
again.
Hopefully that's a good luck charm we need for next season.
Yes. So I definitely will be tuning in and can't wait to see where you go along with Team Witch Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.